Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Harp and Guitar, People and Music. And thank you very much for joining me here once again today for another episode of Whiskey's Blues Gumbo. You know what we do here. We take weird or strange or unusual sounding blues words or phrases. We try to figure out what the heck they're talking about. And today I wanted to talk about the term or the phrase cooling board. Now, again, this is one of those terms that you don't hear very often used or referenced in more modern blues, such as Chicago blues, for example. This is something that you heard either in the pre-war blues era or just sort of at the beginning of the post-war blues era. So you're hearing this more from songs that were recorded in the 1920s, the 1930s, and to some extent the early to mid 1940s. So, for example, there's a song by Blind Willie McTell where he sings, "Don't you feel bad when you see your baby lying on the cooling board?" And actually, even as late as the 1940s, Son House, in his song "Death Letter Blues," sings, "Well, I packed up my suitcase and I took off down the road, but by the time I got there, she was laying on the cooling board." Now, that gives you a little bit of a hint there what cooling board means. Now, essentially, this comes from a practice to do with death and funeral services from sort of the pre 1800s up until about the mid 1800s. This was before undertaker services and embalming techniques were really perfected. So basically, what people would do was they would prepare the body of the deceased family member or a friend or somebody in the community. They would prepare the body themselves, have a viewing, have a wake. Mourners could come and pay their respects, get some closure, and then the body would be placed into a coffin and then buried. Now, where the cooling board comes into place is it's literally a board or a wooden plank that the body or the corpse of the deceased would be placed upon this board, on their back, laying face up and placed in position. And this would literally allow the body or facilitate the cooling down of the body, and therefore slightly slow down the decomposition or the process of the body decomposing. Especially in the south, obviously, where it's really hot and the temperature stays fairly constant throughout the year, and it can be quite humid, especially in and around the Gulf of Mexico and some of those states like Florida and obviously Mississippi, Texas, where they're near the ocean or they're near the Gulf. Now, again, as I mentioned, because a lot of in the past, historically, because there weren't embalming procedures, family members would do all the preparations themselves. They would wash down the body, they would dress the body of their loved one in nice clothing, lay them down on the cooling board, and then members of the community would come to the home. And the body was usually displayed outside on the front porch in the shade, and the mourners, members of the community or members of the family, could come and pay their respects. And also, members of the community would come by and bring food for the mourners as well. And then, usually by the end of that day, then the body would be removed from the cooling board, placed into a coffin, which was also crafted by members of the community, usually a pine box, right? And then the body could be loaded into, a wagon or a cart pulled by horse, or later on into the back of a truck or some kind of vehicle, and then taken to the burying grounds and then laid to rest in the burying grounds. Now, the reason that this was all done so quickly is again because of the lack of the embalming process. So again, the body starts to decompose. So really, the preparations of the loved one's body, um, the wake or the funeral service itself, the transporting of the body, and then the funeral ceremony at the graveyard, or the burial ceremony at the graveyard, and the burial and everything all took place within one day. Now, as time moved forward and scientific advancements were made in medicine and other elsewhere, the embalming process became perfected and it became more widely used. However, in the South, not so much, especially in the poorer communities, and especially, most especially, in the black communities of the poorer communities or the rural communities. And again, as recently as the 1930s, this was still practiced, even though in bigger cities or people of the middle class and so forth, and the upper classes, would have the undertaker prepare the body, and there was a more formalized funeral service um, performed at a funeral home, and then the body would be transported by that funeral home's transportation services, taken to the burying ground or to the graveyard, and then buried. But in the rural South, in the African American communities, the rural communities, the poorer communities, the practice of laying the body on the cooling board, um, the family members or the community members preparing that body for burial, and then the whole funeral process and burial process was all done in one day. And it was all done by family members or members of the community, and everybody would pitch in together. Like I mentioned earlier, people who were crafted or people who were skilled in craftsmanship and woodworking would construct the coffin. Um, Often the close family members at the same time would be preparing the body, as I mentioned, washing down the body, dressing the body up in a fine suit or a fine dress, whatever the case may be. And also the two coins placed over the eyes of the deceased as well, for two reasons. One is to prevent the eyes from flicking open and staying open, right? That as rigor mortis would set in, which would be, I would imagine, rather unsettling. But also, this sort of pays to the or gives a nod to the lore of paying the ferryman two coins to take you across the river Styx to the other side. So you had to have two coins with you when you after you died, so that your body could be taken across. You would pay this ferryman these two coins. So all of this was involved. This was all done, as I mentioned, as a community, and everything was taken care of on the community level or on the family level. And eventually, a lot of these homes, if they were, an important member of the community or a community elder, a lot of times, even if the deceased wasn't a member of their family, the funeral services, the cooling of the body, and the cooling board on the porch would be held at their home. Maybe they had the largest home in the community, so it would facilitate more mourners coming to visit. And eventually, a lot of those homes, over the generations, over the decades, actually became formal funeral homes. So there you go, the cooling board. I hope this shines a little bit of light on the subject. And I get a little bit of an obscure one that you don't hear too often. You don't hear really any reference to it from, guys like Howlin' Wolf or Muddy Waters. You kind of go. You sort of have to go back to the previous generation of blues singers to hear terms like cooling board. So that is going to do it here today. I want to thank you very much once again for tuning in and joining me here at Whiskey's Blues Gumbo. As always, if you have any questions, you come across any strange or odd sounding blues phrases and you want to know what the heck they're talking about, drop us a line, let us know in the comments. Be more than happy to look into it for you and do a video description and figure out what the term means. And of course, on behalf of myself and my partner in crime here, Monk Music, I want to thank you very much for all of your support. If you haven't already, please like, subscribe, and look forward to talking to all of you again soon. Have yourselves a great day and take care. Thanks a lot. Bye bye.